All right, greeting folks. My name is Zach Sarkis. I am the executive director and one of the board members for New York HempLab. We are today at workshop number 8 for the New York Cannabis Legalization Workshop Series, where we are diving into what I'd say is the third part of Article 4, which is adult use cannabis. We're kind of partially into what the licensing structures are outlined as, and yeah, we're going to pick up where we left off last week. We're joined by fellow HempLab board member Jason Klimek, who is a lawyer, an attorney at Woods and Oviatt, and Rochester-based firm. And yeah, we're just stoked to be doing this. Thanks to everybody who's out on the call. Big shout out to our founding sponsoring member, Harris Beach Law Firm. They've been with us from the start and really helped us through COVID and continuing to this day. We appreciate your support so much. Also to our 2021 sponsoring members, Mad Hatter's Hideaway, Rochester-based smoke shop, and the Wagner Firm, which is a group based out of Albany. Thank you both so much for your contributions. It's really helping us move forward. And then, yeah, big shout out to our founding business members, Boiling Code, Canamill, New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association, Singer Farm Naturals, Forefathers Innovation, Dawson Law Firm, Tracy Jong Law Firm, Closed Loop Systems. Yeah, we're super grateful for y'all. And our 2021 business members, Hellendale Dermatology Medical Spa, Beacon Skiff, Apple Orchards, No Wave, Plant Science Labs, EFPR Group, and CBRE. Yeah, Jason, you want to just kind of check in, give us a little update where we're picking up? I think we're at distributor. Last time we were talking about cooperatives, et cetera, but a little introduction to yourself and we'll go from there.
Sure. So thanks again for having me, Zach. I am Jason Klimek. I'm a attorney at Woods Oviatt Gilman in the cannabis and tax practice groups. I've been working with this law, working with legislators and their staff for the past few years, really trying to, help and provide resources so that we can get the best law that we can. Unfortunately, I think, some of these we were not successful on, but hopefully through the regulatory process and the selection of regulators, which according to my clock should happen within the next 2 days, but who knows? They can always, the legislature can always come back into session and approve the regulators. So yeah, a lot of good information in the law, but also a ton of question marks, as we'll see today. They really give no guidance on the micro business and the delivery licenses, as we'll go into. And particularly the micro business, people that are very interested in that license, and there's a lot of questions. And unfortunately, the answer is we don't know until the regulations come out. So that's kind of where we are. But with that said, I think let's jump into it.
Great. And yeah, just for folks who are on this call, just remember, Q&A helps this conversation stay lively. So you can drop your questions in the chat, or you can put them into the specific Q&A, and we'll answer them live. Or if it's if it's something that's kind of out of context, we'll answer it later on. So y'all know the deal at this point. And yeah, well, let's get moving forward. Welcome, Mary. How are you? You are muted at the moment, so you have to unmute. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. Give yourself a little introduction, if you would.
Sure thing. So my name is Mary Kruger. I am the founder and executive director of ROC NORML. We are the Rochester affiliate of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. So we are a nonprofit cannabis consumer advocacy organization and here to offer that perspective.
Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so as we dive into section 71, adult use distributor license. So I'll pick up from here, and then we'll hand off the torch moving forward. So a distributor license shall authorize the acquisition, the possession, distribution, and sale of cannabis from the licensed premises of a licensed adult use cultivator, processor, adult use cooperative, micro business, or registered organization authorized pursuant to this chapter to sell adult use cannabis to duly licensed retail dispensaries and on-site consumption sites. So if you hold this license, you are the person between that can handle any one of the cultivators, except for what it seems like the RO. That's the only thing omitted in this license structure. So you can't work with the registered organizations. And you're able to distribute only to retail dispensaries or on-site consumption lounges, or sites, I should say.
Yeah, let's dissect that. So actually, it says you can acquire, possess, and distribute the sale of cannabis from the licensed premises of an RO. So it's right in the fourth line on the right.
Fourth line on the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or a registered organization. I'm sorry, I overlooked that. So good correction, good catch. Or a registered organization authorized pursuant to this chapter. So you can literally be a distributor for anybody who is cultivating.
And what, and this is sort of like an implication, hopefully the regulations will clarify this a little bit, but micro businesses in that too. So I guess the implication there would be that you could have a distributor as a micro business, you could grow and cultivate, process, and sell your branded items through a distributor to other dispensaries as well. So at least based on that literally last part of that one sentence, that seems like micro businesses can move outside of their own dispensary, which is interesting and good for micro businesses. If they were just limited to their own dispensary, that would be a very, very, very restricted license.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, when we begin to look at distribution across multiple chains, it's enormous. Accessibility, distribution is everything. I think I want to remind everyone that when we looked at the adult use cultivator license, you're also able to have a distributor license as well. So you can be a cultivator, you can also have a distribution license, and in turn, that means you can sell basically everything or anyone's product all the way to retail, but not direct to consumer. Well, so it does seem, go ahead.
Remember though, if you possess a cultivator and or processor license and a distributor license, you're only allowed to distribute your own products.
Oh, so, great. Look at this. That's why we got a lawyer on this call, folks, to keep me in check. I love it.
It's basically, that was, a big, I think, kind of advocacy lobbying effort, because when the MRTA was first released this year, not this version, you had to use a distributor, a third-party distributor. You as a cultivator or processor couldn't distribute your own materials. And a lot of small businesses were saying, hey, this is going to add a massive profit margin or expense really to the whole chain. We need to be able to distribute our own things if we want to. And that's why they allow now cultivators and processors to get a distributor license. But it's this whole, non-vertically integrated type of thing. They don't want market dominance. So they say, sure, you can distribute your own products, but you're not going to be able to do it for everybody unless all you do is distribution.
And so then it sounds like, though, in that case, a grower, processor, distributor could still sell their products to a sole distributor for more expansive distribution.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you wanted to engage a distributor so that they can distribute throughout New York because maybe they have more contacts or whatever, yes, that you can do, or you can get that distributor license yourself and, start introducing yourself to dispensaries and distributing your own product. That absolutely can be done as well. So it's really just what fits your particular business model, but at least they give the choice. And that's, I think, what's important.
Yep, great. So the next line, or next paragraph, number 2, no distributor shall have a direct or indirect economic interest in any micro business, adult use retail dispensary, adult use on-site consumption license, or in any registered organization registered pursuant to the Article 3 of this chapter. This restriction shall not prohibit a registered organization authorized pursuant to the section 39 of this chapter from being granted licensure by the board to distribute adult use cannabis products cultivated and processed by the registered organization to a licensed adult use retail dispensary. So it's interesting, like, does this look like, do these restrictions seem any different? Or maybe we're going to come across them in a little bit. If we go into number 3, it says any distributor with a direct or indirect interest in a licensed cultivator or processor shall only distribute cannabis or cannabis products cultivated and or processed by such licensee. So that's clarifying what Jason just said.
And we have this question again of what is an interest, and that's going to have to be defined in regulation. But that's, I think, one of the big questions is how narrowly or broadly is an interest defined? If I owned one share of Canopy Growth Corporation and they got a New York license and I'm a distributor, am I suddenly, only allowed to distribute their product? Like, it's, there's a lot of regulatory questions, which we just don't have the answers yet, but, fingers crossed, August or September, we'll see a draft. And then, be sure to put in public comments.
So then nothing from subdivision 2 of this section shall prevent a distributor from charging an appropriate fee authorized by the board for the distribution of cannabis, including based on the volume of cannabis distributed. So that's an interesting thing. Like, it's standardized. I'm curious, do alcohol distributors have a authorized fee, appropriate fee, or is it as regulated in alcohol? I'm not sure.
That I don't know, but it is interesting that they are explicitly allowing volume, basically discounts. Whereas you don't typically see that in a lot of markets, where at retail, if you buy more quantity, you get a cheaper price and things like that. But they are explicitly allowing that, which wouldn't be allowed if you were working without a distributor. If you were saying specifically if you were a cultivator and you had a distribution license and you were working with a particular retailer, you couldn't say, oh, I'll sell you my product at a lower price that's not available to anybody. You can't do that. But distributors can, based on volume. So that could potentially throw off the market a little bit, because obviously if you're able to buy larger quantities or sell larger quantities, you're going to more than likely get some type of discount, which obviously, benefits moneyed parties.
Yeah. Yep. Section 72 is adult use dispensary license. A retail dispensary license shall authorize the acquisition, possession, sale, and delivery of cannabis from a licensed premises of the retail dispensary by such licensee to cannabis consumers. No person may have a direct or indirect financial or controlling interest in more than 3 adult use retail dispensary license issued pursuant to chapter, and no person holding a retail dispensary license may also hold an adult use cultivation, processor, microbusiness, cooperative, or distributor license pursuant to this article, or being registered as a registered organization pursuant to Article 3 of this chapter, except for such organizations licensed pursuant to Section 68A and 68B of this article.
So 2 things. One, I could have sworn that on the CLE I was on with Axel, he said one license could have 3 locations. So does that mean that you could have 9 dispensaries? I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was wondering the same thing. It's where we go back to no person may have a direct or indirect financial or controlling interest in more than 3 adult use retail dispensary licenses. And yeah, that sounds to me to 3 separate licenses. And then how many locations can each license have? And I'm pretty sure it's 3. Let's see if that's broken down in here further.
And then the second thing I have is, I just find it interesting that in number 3, no person holding a retail dispensary license may also hold an adult use cultivation, blah, 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 whatever. They don't use that direct and indirect financial interest language again, but they do use that language in the cultivation license as it applies to the dispensary license. So from a legal perspective, it's very odd to have these differing wordings of these prohibitions that are trying to get at the same thing, but they just keep wording it differently every single time. And from a legal perspective, that like really throws off your analysis, because you're like, is that intentional? And do they actually mean something different? Or is it just, this was drafted relatively quickly and they weren't, really making sure that everything harmonized together?
And so what would be the course of correction, would you say, if it is clear? Is it only after the fact that it gets manipulated or used in a way that people didn't want it to, or what?
I mean, there's a few ways they could do it. They could offer, technical corrections to the law. They could, which would actually amend the law. They could clarify it more in regulation, which is probably the best course of action, because then they don't have to go through the entire legal issue again, or, trying to pass a law. Or they leave it alone and see if there's an issue that pops up, and then it gets either taken care of through regulation, or it gets litigated, or the office provides just some guidance on it. We'll just kind of have to wait and see how they want to deal with it. My guess is, if anything, it's going to be through the regulatory process. I doubt there's going to be able to pass legislation before this goes in, at least the regulations come out. I think before they want to amend the law, I think they have to kind of see how it's going to run for a little while before they start tweaking the actual law. They can always tweak through regulation, and that's just a lot easier.
So then on to number 4, no retail license shall be granted for any premises unless that applicant shall be the owner thereof, or shall be able to demonstrate possession of the premises within 30 days of final approval of the license through a lease, management agreement, or another agreement giving the applicant control over the premises in writing for a term not less than the license period. With the exception of delivery or a micro business license, no premises shall be licensed to sell cannabis products unless said premise shall be located in a store, the principal entrance to which shall be from the street level and located on a public thoroughfare in premises which may be occupied, operated, or conducted for business, trade, or industry. So that's pretty specific. Like, you can't just have something off the beaten track. It's got to be pretty clearly located, etc. Do you got any more comments you want to add to that, Jason?
Can't be mobile, like not like a delivery service I'm talking about, but like you couldn't have a street, like a food truck kind of idea. Can't be that. We just got a question: can there be housing units attached?
Great
Maybe.
question. Yeah.
I think that would, so long as, because the law, I don't know if we've gotten to it yet. Oh no, it's number 6 there. There's outright prohibitions about how close you can be to schools and houses of worship and things like that. The rest, that would probably come down to zoning, whether it could be attached to a building that has residential. That's probably down at the individual municipality level. So we don't know that yet, but
there's also a question in the Q&A too. It says, is this saying that you need to have a lease when you apply for license? It's saying that you need to, within 30 days of getting your license, you need to have access. You need to have a written contract that gives you access to the property for the entirety of the lease. So you don't have to have it when you apply, but within 30 days of your application being accepted, you need to have it.
And that's going to be potentially tough, because
Yep.
Who knows how long this license process is going to take. It could be rubber stamped and you get your license very quickly after you apply, or it could be 6 months later. Who knows? And so how do you get a landlord on the hook for that long on a contingent basis? Like, hey, we'll take the property, but if we only if we get the license. Meanwhile, the landlord is just holding the property open and not getting rent for it. So I think this is going to be very tough, and I think it's got to change at some point, especially if the law is really designed to benefit social equity applicants. I think this provision is very tough for them, potentially very costly. And I think it could really hurt those licensees.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. Number 6, the no cannabis retail license shall be located at shall locate a storefront within 500 feet of school grounds, as such term is defined in the education law, or within 200 feet of a house of worship. Okay, micro business license. Put a question in here. Oh, I guess that's not a real question.
Just realize we just had on adult use dispensaries, we just had 6 paragraphs. Micro business, which is cultivation, processing, and adult use, 3 paragraphs.
Huh. Yeah, literally. Yeah, and that's where it's like, we're gonna see when these regs come out what this is exactly gonna look like. But the micro business license, section 73, a micro business license shall authorize the limited cultivation, processing, distribution, delivery, and dispensing of their own adult use cannabis and cannabis products. A micro business licensee may not hold any direct or indirect interest in any other license in this chapter and may only distribute its own cannabis and cannabis products to dispensaries. The size and scope and eligibility criteria of a micro business shall be determined in regulation by the board in consultation with the executive director and the chief equity officer. The granting of such licenses shall promote social and economic equity applicants as provided for this chapter.
So I think that that's interesting right there, is because that and the delivery license are the only 2 licenses that outright have that 3rd paragraph there that basically says, we want these, to be considered for social and economic equity applicants. So it seems like they're really calling out right in the law that these 2 licenses may favor social equity applicants. I don't know if that's the case, but that language right in there certainly gives you the idea that that could be.
Another question in the chat from Laura, doesn't this run counter to social equity? Micro businesses, I'm sure, would want the opportunity to sell to processors. Yeah, that's a big question. Honestly, when we talk about the extract market and there's a huge boom in the extract market, and the ability to sell your extra product, your byproduct, into this extract market to a processor is something that is probably pretty foundational to a business. So if you can't sell to anyone, then it's like, yeah, what you can't process is wasted, it sounds like.
Or even just, processing is, definitely one of the most capital intensive. If you're growing cannabis and you have a dispensary as a micro business, but you don't have the capability yet or the capital or whatever to have a processing, can you give some to a processor and get it white labeled and sent back to you? We just don't know. Hopefully that'll be all covered in the regulation. I would say that practically that has to be the case, that micro businesses should be allowed to do that, because that promotes competition too, and it's helping other small businesses, a small processor or something like that. So hopefully that will be covered. Hopefully it will be allowed.
Totally. Great question. All right, so on to section 74, delivery license. A delivery license shall authorize the delivery of cannabis and cannabis products by licensees independent of another adult use cannabis license, provided that each delivery license may have a total of no more than 25 individuals or their equivalent thereof, providing full-time paid delivery services to cannabis consumers per week under one license. For the purpose of this section, the State Cannabis Advisory Board shall provide recommendations to the board for the application process, license criteria, and scope of license activities for this class license. No person may have a direct or indirect financial or controlling interest in more than one delivery license. The granting of such license shall promote social and economic equity applicants as provided in this chapter. So let's make this clear. There's no language in here that you can't have an interest in other licenses besides one delivery license. Am I missing something there, Jason?
No, I'd have to go back and see if there was any prohibition on the other licenses, as to whether you could have an interest in a delivery license. But I think, common sense would say that if you're a dispensary, they have to allow you to have a delivery license too, if you want it, because, why wouldn't they? I mean, that's just another service the dispensary could offer. But then again, they could say, we don't like this vertical integration. That's vertical integration. This promotes more competition. But the delivery license is the only license that has less information than the micro business license.
Totally.
And the standard answer is we have to wait till the regulations to see what happens. Look back at the hemp regulations and how much detail they filled in from a lot of the questions, and just understand that the cannabis regulations are going to be so much more than that, because there's just so much more here and there's a lot of questions.
Well, competing for the least amount of information is the nursery license in section 75. A nursery license shall authorize the production, sale, and distribution of clones, immature plants, seeds, and other agricultural products used specifically for planting, propagation, and the cultivation of cannabis by licensed adult use cultivators, cooperatives, microbusinesses, and registered organizations. For the purpose of this section, the office shall provide recommendations to the board for the application process, license criteria, and scope of licensed activities for this class of license. The granting of such license shall promote social and economic equity applicants as provided by this chapter. A person or entity holding an adult use cultivator's license may apply for and obtain one nursery license to sell directly to other cultivators, cooperatives, microbusinesses, and registered organizations. So I go back up to that first paragraph, and it says, clones, immature plants, seeds, and other agricultural products used specifically for planting, propagation, and cultivation. So let's say I want to sell soil, or I want to sell harvesting equipment. Does that mean I have to have a license for that if it's something used specifically for the planting, propagation, and cultivation? Or is it only if I'm going to be plant touching?
I think common sense has to say, if you're Home Depot and you're selling things that are generally, for growing plants, you do not have to obtain a cannabis license. It would only be if you're doing that plus clones, immature plants, seeds. Yep. I think that has to be the common sense reading of it, because nobody's going to require garden shops who are just selling supplies for everybody to get cannabis licenses.
Yep, I love that common sense concept. And yeah, begs the question though, so what will the limitations be? Can these nurseries sell all the Home Depot stuff and clones, and we'll see.
I mean, I think so. I think this sounds like it's designed to be a garden shop that also offers cannabis specific things. So I would think so, but it'll be interesting to see. But, I think we're going to see a lot of these businesses come online that nobody really thought about. Like, everybody thinks about growing or dispensaries, things like that. But hey, a garden shop that sells cannabis clones and things like that, but is also a regular garden shop too.
Yep. Do you want to take section 76, Jason?
Sure. Notifications to municipalities of adult use retail dispensary or on-site consumption license. This one is important because this is pretty much like the yay or nay that municipalities can give right to the state about whether or not you should be a retail dispensary there or on-site consumption. Not less than 30 days, nor more than 270 days before filing an application for licensure as an adult use retail dispensary or registered organization, adult use cultivator, processor, distributor, retail dispensary, or an on-site consumption licensee. An applicant shall notify the municipality in which the premises is located of such applicant's intent to file such an application. Such notification shall be made to the clerk of the village, town, or city, as the case may be, wherein the premise is located. For the purposes of this section, notification need only be given to the clerk of the village when the premise is located within the boundaries of the village. And in the city of New York, the community board established pursuant to section 2800 of the New York City Charter with jurisdiction over the area in which the premises is located shall be considered the appropriate public body to which notification should be given. Such notification shall be made in such form as shall be prescribed by the rules of the board. When a city, town, or village, and in New York City, a community board expresses an opinion for or against the granting of such registration, license, or permit application, any such opinion shall be deemed part of the record which the office makes its recommendation to the board to grant or deny the application, and the board shall respond in writing to such city, town, village, or community board with an explanation of how such opinion was considered in granting or denial of the application. So right there, you know, they may express an opinion and it could be bad, it could be good. So this is just another kind of point of uncertainty in the law, but certainly, you know, I think it warrants reaching out to those municipalities that people are considering opening one of these, you know, dispensaries or on-site consumption places and having conversations, because you certainly don't want them having a negative comment. And I think even an indifferent, you know, no comment is not going to be as good as a supportive comment. Let's see, we had a question pop up too. Presuming there would be a time requirement for town to respond, maybe in regulation. I don't know that it's in here. Let's see, number 5. Such notification shall be made by a certified mail, return receipt requested, overnight delivery service with proof of mailing, or personal service upon offices of the clerk or community board. The board shall require such notification to be on a standardized form that can be obtained on the internet, and has to include the trade name or doing business as, full name of the applicant, street address, mailing address, name and address and phone number of the attorney or representative of the application, if any. Statement indicating whether the application is for a new establishment, a transfer of existing licensed business, a renewal of the license of existing business, or sorry, a renewal of existing license, or an alteration of an existing licensed premises. If the establishment is a transfer or previously licensed premises, the name of the old establishment and the such establishment's registration or license number. In the case of a renewal or alteration application, the registration or license number of the applicant and the type of license. Again, that's a very important provision, and I think there's steps that can be taken now to kind of start addressing that, just feeling out the municipalities and things like that. Section 77, adult use on-site consumption license. Provisions governing on-site consumption license. Well, no applicant shall be granted an on-site consumption license for any premises unless the applicant shall be the owner thereof or shall be in possession of said premises under a lease in writing for a term not less than the license period, except, however, that such license may thereafter be renewed without the requirement of a lease as provided in this section. This subdivision shall not apply to premises leased from government agencies, provided, however, that the appropriate administrator of such government agency provides some form of written documentation regarding the terms of occupancy under which the applicant is leasing said premises from the government agency for presentation to the office at the time of the license application. Such documentation shall include the terms of the occupancy between the applicant and the government agency, including but not limited to any short-term leasing agreement or written occupancy agreements. No person.
That's definitely a mouthful for an open paragraph.
Yes. No person may have a direct or indirect financial or controlling interest in more than 3 adult use on-site consumption licenses pursuant to this chapter. No person holding an on-site consumption license may also hold an adult use retail dispensary, cultivation processor, micro business, cooperative, or distributor license pursuant to this article or be registered as a registered organization pursuant to Article 3. No applicant shall be granted an adult use on-site consumption license for any premises within 500 feet of a school grounds, or as such term is defined in the education law, or 200 feet from a house of worship. The board may consider any or all of the following in determining whether public convenience and advantage and the public interest will be promoted by granting of an adult use on-site consumption license at a particular location. A, that it is a privilege and not a right to cultivate, process, distribute, and sell cannabis. The number, classes, and character of other licenses in proximity to the location and in the particular municipality or subdivision thereof. So remember, this is the board looking at whether or not to grant this. So this is outside the municipality saying, oh, you know, well, we already got like 5 adult use on-site consumption, 6 is probably too many. This is the board saying, well, we don't really care what they're saying right now. We think there's too many. We're not going to allow this. but that's a may. So they may consider it, or they may just say, you know what, the municipalities, you govern how you want your municipality to run in this regard. Let's see. Evidence that all necessary licenses and permits have been obtained from the state and all other governing bodies. Whether there is a demonstrated need for space to consume cannabis. So this, I think, falls on that social equity piece of providing a space, but it also, if you take the analogy that an on-site consumption area is like a bar, then is it a safe space where you can bring your own, because you can't bring your own alcohol to a bar, or is it a safe space you can consume but you got to buy it there as well, like a bar? But it is interesting that they put that directly in there to I think address the concern that there are definitely people who can't consume in the home, and they want to keep public consumption, particularly like public intoxication, relatively down. So they're providing this. Effect of the grant of the license on pedestrian or vehicular traffic and parking in proximity to the location. The existing noise level at the location. As we all know, people smoking pot are super loud.
But again, it's something to be mindful of. I've noted this before. The effect of the grant of the license on pedestrian, vehicular traffic and parking and noise. That's like an environmental impact statement, and you need to hire an engineering firm that's going to go out and observe what the traffic is, and observe what the noise is, and multiple times throughout a particular season or year, and then do an estimate of what the impact will be on that community. It's not just something you can just go out and say. It's like you got to pay someone to do the survey test, that's going to be valid enough to prove this. That's just my experience from seeing what developments or building or et cetera have to go through to get that kind of information. It's extensive.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see, if out of the gate, adult use on-site consumption licenses are a license that realistically can be applied for. If they're saying you need these environmental impact studies and however many tens of thousands of dollars that takes, in addition to all the fees to get the license and whatever, is anybody really going to do it? There's not a ton of adult use on-site consumption locations throughout the United States. I think Nevada is considering signing the law to amend it to allow that. But it's maybe they're going to just kind of wait and see how things go and see if there's a need. It's really an unknown. But certainly there's a lot of qualifications on this one in particular, which they don't seem to also require of a dispensary, I guess, because people aren't going to really be hanging around and loitering at a dispensary versus going to a bar where there's the chance for people to become loud and things like that.
True.
All right. If the board, any other factors specified by the law or regulation that are relevant to determine that granting a license would promote public convenience and advantage and the public interest of the community. If the board shall disapprove of an application for an on-site consumption license, it shall state and file in its offices the reasons therefore, and shall notify the applicant thereof. Such applicant may thereupon apply to the board for a review of such action in a manner to be prescribed by the rules of the board. No adult use cannabis on-site consumption licensee shall keep upon the licensed premises any adult use cannabis products except those purchased from a licensed adult use distributor, RO, adult use cultivator, processor, distributor, retail dispenser, RO adult use cultivator, processor, and distributor, cooperative, or micro business authorized to sell adult use cannabis. So right there, apparently micro businesses are allowed to sell to on-site consumption, and we know they can't hold an on-site consumption. So presumably you can sell to unrelated third parties if you're a micro business, which is good.
Or I wonder if that's that loop with the distributor. it's like they can carry it, but yeah, the way it reads is unless they purchased it from that individual, which is interesting. It seems a little counter to the language we've seen before. So
Yeah.
fascinating.
Let's see. And only in containers approved by the board. Such containers shall have affixed thereto such labels as may be required by the rules of the board. No adult use on-site consumption licensee shall reuse, refill, tamper with, adulterate, dilute, or fortify the contents of any container of cannabis products as received from the manufacturer or distributor. While I get what they're saying there, that does kind of create the situation where there could be a lot of waste because you're outright prohibiting, reusing containers. And, odds are these are probably going to be a lot of like single-use plastic containers unless there's a regulation that says you can't do that. So hopefully there's some type of recycling program or something, because this has the chance to produce a lot of waste.
Truth. Well, it's interesting too, that last line, adulterated, dilute, or fortify the contents of any container of cannabis products as received from the manufacturer or distributor. I guess does micro business fall into the realm of distributor? It's like, yeah, there's that kind of fine line. And I guess, to package anything, any flower product specifically into a package, it's probably going to have to have a manufacturing license per se. So just interesting. Do you feel that negates at all the openness that we thought was addressed before?
I mean, I think, like if you go to Colorado, I believe like the dispensaries themselves can have like a giant jar where they portion out the amount for you versus Massachusetts. I think they just have pre-packaged, here's your eighth. So it sounds like New York would be going more the Massachusetts model of, this is it. So you couldn't also be like an on-site consumption lounge where you buy like concentrate and then make your own brownies or something like that. That doesn't seem to be prohibited because that would be tampering, adulterating, diluting, or fortifying. Fortifying is literally the addition of something to food usually.
I'm curious here too about white labeling, like can the on-site consumption lounge contract with a manufacturer to white label their brand on the package that came from a legitimized manufacturer? Like, why wouldn't you do that?
That seems like it would be allowed because if you were contracting with the manufacturer who then either had a distributing license or sold it to a distributor who then sold it back to you, I mean, that seemingly would be allowed because you're not holding alternate licenses and you're just kind of contracting and saying, we'd like to put our brand on this.
And I mean, it'll still say distributed and manufactured by XYZ. So I think that leaves room.
Right. And we know that, ultimately the cannabis market really devolves down to commodities and branding. So I think that would be a critical point that should be allowed. Hopefully that will be the case, but it sounds like it would be based on the statute. But again, we have that caveat of we have no idea what the regs are going to say. Let's see. No adult use on-site consumption licensee shall sell, deliver, or give away, or cause or permit to be or procure to be sold, delivered, or given away any cannabis for consumption on the premises where sold in a container or package containing a quantity or number of servings more than authorized by the board. So, you can't. Clearly, I guess they're gonna, limit the amount in some way, shape, or form, and you can't exceed that.
Yeah, that kind of seems like, they're going to try to make some false equivalence to alcohol and say, yeah, you can only have 1 gram, 1 gram or 1/8 jars, like a maximum number. And then in turn, how much someone could personally buy, which we know is kind of irrelevant. I mean, it may make sense for people who are new to cannabis, but like from folks who have been consumers and know what they want and need or enable to, it may be limiting. Jason, do you have any thoughts on that question in the Q&A?
I honestly can't remember what the co-op license said, so we'd have to just go back and see if you can hold it. I don't think they can do dispensaries and retail stuff. I think they can only sell to those, but that's based off of my recollection from a week or two ago whenever we did it. You just have to go back and look.
Yeah, it's like, if I'm not mistaken, they have the ability to cultivate, manufacture, and distribute, but not sell directly to consumers. So I don't know, maybe like it's not that a co-op could be, but you could hold a cooperative license. But no, the cooperative license makes it explicit that you can't hold any other license. I'm happy to jump back up there if we want to peek at it real quick.
I just pulled it up. Hang on. I can, let's see.
That's a great question, Allison.
No adult use cannabis cooperative shall have a direct or indirect interest in, including by stock ownership, blah, 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 in any premises licensed as an adult use cannabis retail dispensary or in any business license as an adult use cannabis retail dispensary pursuant to this chapter. Interesting. So no dispensary, but I don't actually see on-site consumption. Interesting. But that was looking back over 2 seconds. So
I think it does go back to who they're able to.
There's no natural person or member of an adult use cooperative license may have a direct or indirect financial or controlling interest in any other adult use cannabis license issued pursuant to this chapter. So based on that, who knows what the regulations will say, but based on that, no, you couldn't do that. You couldn't have an interest in on-site consumption or something like that.
Hmm. All right. What are we on? So now we're on 9.
9. Yeah. No adult use on-site consumption licensee shall suffer, permit, or promote activities or events on its premises wherein any person shall use such premises for activities including, but not limited to, gambling, exposing or simulating contests or fireworks that are prohibited by subdivision, a bunch of subdivisions of the ABC law, or any other similar activities the board deems prohibited. So no cannabis and gambling, no cannabis and fireworks, and whatever else they decide. So, you know, if you had thoughts about having a gambling lounge with cannabis, sorry. Maybe 420 parties. There's that question. Just, you know, they can only be cannabis. Let's see, number 10. No premises licensed to sell adult use cannabis for on-site consumption under this chapter shall be permitted to have any opening or means of entrance. Hold on one second.
Means of entrance or passageway for persons or things between the licensed premises or any other room or place in the building containing the licensed premises or adjoining or abutting premises, unless the ingress and egress is restricted by an employee, agent of the licensee, or another method approved by the board. So essentially, if your lounge is in a building connected to other places, it cannot have any doors going into those other places unless it's monitored. And then, yeah, you want to pick back up on 11?
Sure. Let's see. 11. Each adult use on-site consumption licensee shall keep and maintain upon the licensed premises adequate records of all transactions involving the business transacted by such licensee, which shall show the amount of cannabis products in an applicable metric measurement purchased by such licensee, together with the names, license numbers, and places of business of the persons from whom the same were purchased, the amount involved in such purchases, as well as the sales of cannabis products made by such licensee. The board is hereby authorized to promulgate rules and regulations permitting the on-site licensee operating 2 or more premises separately licensed to sell cannabis products for on-site consumption license to integrate or retain in this state methods or practices of centralized accounting, bookkeeping, control records, reporting, billing, invoicing, or payment respecting purchases, sales, or deliveries of cannabis products, or methods and practices of centralized, need to scroll up or down. Centralized receipts or storage of cannabis products within the state without segregation or earmarking of any such separately licensed premises, wherever such methods and practices assure the availability at such licensee's central or main office of the data reasonably needed for the enforcement of this chapter. It's track and trace. There's, you know, some program that people are going to use, metric or whatever it ends up being. That's going to keep all of that stuff. Number 12. All licensed adult use on-site consumption premises shall be subject to inspection by any peace officer acting pursuant to his or her special duties, or police officer, and by the duly authorized representatives of the board during the hours when the said premises are open for the transaction of business. 13. An adult use on-site consumption licensee shall not provide cannabis products to any person under the age of 21. No person under the age of 21 shall be permitted on the premises of a cannabis on-site consumption facility. The provisions of Article 13E of the Public Health Law restricting the smoking or vaping of cannabis shall not apply to adult use on-site consumption premises. So you can smoke indoors like they do for like the specialized cigar shops and things like that, which obviously would have to be the case. You know, I don't think they would ever restrict on-site consumption to just edibles or tinctures, I should say. Section 78, record keeping and tracking. The board shall, by regulation, require each licensee pursuant to this article to adopt and maintain security, tracking, record keeping, record retention, and surveillance systems relating to all cannabis at every stage of acquiring, possession, manufacture, sale, distribution, transporting, testing, or distributing by a licensee, subject to the regulations of the board.
So that's just, long story short, get comfortable with doing all your business in front of a video camera at the very least, you know, and having all the records to dial or to be in alignment with the time frame of your video recording. That's the level of detail that will be expected.
Yeah. You know, everything's going to be an open book for the state. Like they want to be able to see exactly where everything is going, where it does go, where it has been, connect all the dots. You know, one of their biggest issues is the diversion into the illicit market because they don't get their taxes. And it, you know, unregulated product. It's not good. Let's see. Section 79, or am I on number 2? Yeah, right. Every licensee shall keep and maintain upon licensed premises adequate books and records of all transactions involving the licensee and the sale of its products, which shall include, but is not limited to, all information required by the rules promulgated by the board. Such regulation may require the utilization of an approved seed to sale tracking system, compiling a licensee's cannabis inventory and transaction data. They say may require the utilization. I have to imagine that they are going to require it. Inspections and ongoing requirements. All licensed or permitted premises, regardless of the type of premises.
All pretty standard. The stuff we've said is like, you know, authorized by a peace officer, police officer, and make themselves available to the agent for inspection basically at any point in time as required by the board during operating hours. And then, yeah, you got to live by the codes, the state and local building codes, fire, health, safety, and other applicable regulations.
So here's another section about the prohibitions. Adult use cultivator, processor, distributor not to be interested in retail dispensaries. You know, so they really want to hammer this home that you can't do. It gets its own section in addition to being mentioned in every one of those licenses. It shall be unlawful for any person authorized to cultivate, process, or distribute under this article to be interested directly or indirectly in any premises where any cannabis product is sold at retail, including for on-site consumption, or in any business devoted wholly or partially to the sale or delivery of cannabis product at retail, including for on-site consumption by stock ownership, interacting director, mortgage or lien, or any personal any personal or real property, or by any other means. I mean, that is ridiculously broad. Just again, like by other means. Can you dream it up? It's prohibited unless the regulations say differently. Like it's just extremely broad. Make or cause to be made any loan to any person engaged in any manufacture or sale of cannabis product at wholesale or retail. So you can't make loans. You can't make gifts. Make a gift or render any service of any kind whatsoever, directly or indirectly, to any person licensed under this chapter, which in the judgment of the board may influence such licensee to purchase the product of such cultivator or processor or distributor. Or D, enter into any contract or agreement with any retail, on-site consumption, or delivery licensee whereby such licensee agrees to confine his or her sales to cannabis products manufactured or sold by one or more such cultivators or processors or distributors. Any such contract or agreement shall be void and subject the licenses of all the parties concerned to revocation for cause for any applicable administrative enforcement or penalties.
Do you think a sample qualifies as a gift? Like if you want people to sample your product, like I mean, like how?
I think if it's literally, you know, hey, we've never met before, or hey, you know, we transact business, but we just got this new product that we're trying out. Here's a free sample, and it's, you know, one little thing. I think you're probably fine. If it's, hey, here's a box of free samples, and you know, we'll give them to you every month, I think then you probably start to have a problem. And then anything in between is a gray area, right? So, but you know, under the plain reading of this statute, again, could be altered by regulation, it's going to be very, 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 you know, my personal opinion is you can't be mixing these licenses. You can't be trying to get around the law. I just don't see how you can until we get other guidance from the regulations. But, you know, I think that this does have a potential to harm small businesses and social equity in particular, who don't have a lot of money, who maybe are trying to bootstrap this themselves but don't have enough, or you know, the other alternative would be to get investments. But like the problem with investments is typically, you know, people with money will invest into like a fund or something like that, which will then invest into multiple businesses to kind of spread out the risk. This is saying, no, you can only invest into one business. And, you know, anybody with common sense says it's, as a passive investor, it's probably not a great idea to put all your eggs in one basket. Like I'm sure most people's, you know, retirement accounts are not invested in one stock. And so that's kind of what they're forcing, you know, people to do here. And that could really harm small businesses. You know, it's not a big deal for somebody with their own multiple millions of dollars to invest into their own business. But if you're trying to get this thing up and running, you're hoping that you find one person that's willing to say, yes, I will invest into you. I will be shut out from every other license. No matter how little I own, I could own 1%, still no other licenses. So hopefully we get some more clarity on that, because I think that this could actually be counterproductive to the legislature's goal here in some respects. Like I get what they're trying to do, but I think we need a little bit more guidance because I think it's just overly broad.
Let's wrap up this point number 2. Yeah, just Laura, real quick. Yeah, social equity enterprises. I mean, anyone's gonna, like, all businesses. There's gonna be a lot of businesses that are gonna need money. I'm actually curious too. You think from like banks, is this gonna limit who banks can loan to? If a bank is loaning, has a financial interest in like getting money back from one business.
You're assuming federal legalization, right? Because banks aren't giving you any money.
Yeah, or like the credit union concept, et cetera. You know, just regardless, it's like, where's money going to come from if it can only come from one hand, you know? Or
and
like,
there are the social equity funds, you know, that they're going to develop, but how much money is going to be in them and how many licensees are going to apply for it? You know, if it takes, let's just throw out a number, let's say 500,000 to set up a shop or something like that. Is each social equity license going to get 500,000? If not, how are they getting the rest of that money? You know, there's just a lot of questions that remain unanswered. So just to finish up number 2, the provisions of this section does not prohibit a registered organization authorized pursuant to section blah, 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 or a micro business from cultivating, processing, or selling adult use cannabis under this article at facilities wholly owned and operated by such RO or micro business, subject to any conditions, limitations, or restrictions. And the board shall develop rules and regulations in regard to this section. Please release them soon, because really, really, you know, handicapping our ability to kind of plan and game some things out, because we just don't know.
Truth. Well, that wraps up another section in Article 4, but not Article 4 yet. So next week we're going to go a little bit deeper into Article 4 as well, just to finish that. But yeah, appreciate everyone who's on the call, who's been on the call all these weeks. Folks who are watching this recording, hope you're having a great day, a great evening. Jason, big thank you to you for making your time and offering your perspective. It's just it really wouldn't be the same without you. And yeah, big shout out again to our sponsors, you know, Harris Beach Law Firm, Mad Hatter Smoke Shop, and Just let me pull up the names so I don't forget. The Wagner firm. Just sorry, got a lot of moving pieces going on. Thank you guys so much. Jason, we'll see you next week and hope to see everyone else on the call later as well. Take care. See ya.